Welcome everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:31. It looks like we have a full board between virtual and in person. Nice to see everyone. Happy New Year. We're going to start with our consent agenda. On it we have prior minutes from the December 6th meeting as well as a number of first readings on policy and one policy to be removed. Any discussion, questions about the consent agenda? Okay, then I'll make a motion to approve. We'll do that by roll. Lisa?
Aye.
Kat? Arlene?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. So as far as the flow of the meeting and prioritization tonight, we are going to have Lynn go before Morgan with our big budget discussion. Other than that, everything will flow according to the agenda that's in front of you. And that brings us to our visitors and public comment, and it looks like we do have a number of people. Welcome, nice to see everyone. Just before we start, it's helpful for public comment if you let us know who you are. I know I have a list here. Because we have a lot to get through this evening, we're gonna allocate 2 minutes per person, so if you can try to keep it to that, that is great. Yeah, again, just say your name before you start, that would be helpful. So, who would like to start?
Jan Ketchum, Bakersfield.
Oh, and I'm sorry to interrupt, one more thing, just for those of you unfamiliar with how public comment kind of works, just to remind people that, you know, it's a meeting of the public, not a public meeting, so that when people come to talk, we really just hear you and then take it under consideration, but there's not really a dialogue back and forth. It's not an opportunity to kind of engage in, you know, debate or conversation, but we certainly welcome opinions. And then moving forward, you know, we'll take everything that you share with us tonight under consideration. And then we are doing a very extensive budget discussion. So if it's helpful for you to stay for the duration through the budget discussion, you're absolutely welcome. And then I would be happy to have another round of public comment with that same time constraint of 2 minutes per person. If you had any further comments, having gone through the meeting with us and heard the budget discussion.
Before you take action.
Before we take action, yes. So sorry for that interruption, and please.
Repeat my name. And it will be shorter than 2 minutes. Jan Ketchum, Bakersfield, just a community member.
Hi, Ashley O'Rourke. I'm here to just basically discuss the music department in Bakersfield and just really promote having our music teacher for a full 5 days and the fast positivity that she has brought to our school and just promoting our positivity with outreach to our students and really the promotion that she's done within the classroom and the lessons that she's really done with it. And just, we've only been there since June, and just watching even my daughter's growth within that music growth. Like, she's got her to go to music lessons and actually gotten her to play music, and it's just great to watch her just thrive within the music department and seeing all these kids in band and choir. I just can't. We've only known her since June, and just watching her outreach to these students is just really great to see. Yeah.
I'm Lorelai Westbrook. I sent a letter to the board and Lynn. I am a parent, community member, and a new employee at Bakersfield School. I was previously a teacher in St. Albans for 12 years. And I am also here to just recommend and promote the Allie going full-time because of her impact on the school and the students. And I think the amount of SEL needs we have in our schools right now and how those are largely being met by this teacher is huge. We have a lot of students who are accessing her for both music and other needs that if she was not there, we would have students who would not want to come to school. And I also have a letter here from 2 students that I don't think got sent out, but I have that.
Sharon Lawyer, community member, employee, parent and grandparent. I've had many years with Bakersfield, really appreciated the fine arts. I had one that was very much into sports, one less so, and the opportunity to develop those skills. I have to speak more on behalf of the fact that we had a program prior to ALLY, but what it did for students, and I just really see the value in something like a fine arts program and the opportunity for kids to thrive in something beyond academics and sports. And you've done an amazing job in a short time that you've been here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess it's my turn. I actually have a letter and a copy for everybody if you would like to pass these around. But it's easier for me to read it, I think. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of Bakersfield School Music Program. I'm Allie Brown, the current music teacher there. This is my 4th year teaching at BEMS and my 8th year teaching music. I've taught in a variety of communities, including rural New Mexico, rural Vermont, and New York City, Massachusetts. And the Bakersfield community has been an enriching, welcoming, and wonderful community to create music with. I'm here to advocate to increase the BEMS music teaching position from its current 0.8 FTE to 1.0 FTE, and to answer any questions that you may have for me. While any music education is impactful for students, the Vermont Music Educators Association and data collected by local colleges have shown that it takes about 5 years for a high-quality program to be built in any school. Having consistent teacher, efficient resources, enough teaching time, and professional student-teacher relationships are at the heart of creating an enriching learning environment. Increasing the BEMS teaching position by even 1 day will significantly benefit the students by allowing more skill-specific instruction through private lessons, more rehearsal time for the existing programs, and adequate planning and prep time for the teacher. The current schedule, full of general music classes, elective music classes, and instrumental lessons, is over capacity, and it does not allow for contract-obligated prep times, currently 25 minutes as opposed to 140 contracted minutes for an 80% employee. As you can see on the schedule I've attached for reference, any time throughout the day is allotted for student learning, and still recess times are needed for lessons. Homeschool students don't have access to music throughout the regular school day hours, and piano and voice lessons are unfortunately not even considered, and have been requested by many students and parents. Music programs are so much more than a block of time for students to select. Around rural Vermont, conversations surrounding full-time music positions are ongoing and constant, especially within the Vermont Music Educators Association, of which I am a member. Many comparable districts, including Orleans and Caledonia, have attempted to justify full-time music teaching positions by splitting a single teacher across multiple schools. I have done this personally and can confirm doing so inhibits strong relationship building, prevents consistency for students, and negatively impacts the school community and climate. Additionally, the retention rates for these schools and positions are incredibly low, as teacher turnover is highest when staff is split across schools, as they are unable to create a singular, fulfilling, robust, and high-quality program in any of the schools they teach at. Subsequently, every time a teacher leaves, the next teacher has to rebuild and start again, and the program may never reach its full potential. Teachers embody music programs, and the environment teachers create informs students' decisions to participate in these empowering and self-confidence building art form. At BEMS, 78% of eligible students are enrolled in elective music programs. Let's lead by example at BEMS and create this full-time model. Show our district that the overwhelming benefits of strong music programs create a positive and uplifting school climate through music and drama, in addition to our wonderful sports, academics, art, and other extracurricular activities. I'm so proud of all the students at BEMS, of the program we have created together. When I started 4 years ago, we had 3 students participating in lessons. Now the program I have built at BEMS has 34 students participating in lessons, and 37 4th through 8th graders, about 56%, participating in the spring musical. Every year I have seen the musical program produce stronger student performances, while the music ensemble programs continue to build teamwork among the students. The music program keeps students coming to school each day, and actively allows students to activate full executive brain function through performing music. Music-related performances are valued by this community and are the highest attending events the school puts on, connecting the community and the school. This is not just about making my position full-time, but rather this is further improving our program, one that warrants and deserves the attention of a full-time teacher, and then keeping that teacher to sustain such a program, all while providing a full education for all students in the Bakersfield community. My goal is to cultivate such an enriching program that nearly all students want to and can participate to enhance student learning and their academic and social emotional performance. We are getting there at Ben's with our already high number of student participants. Just adding one extra day, which is already included in the proposed budget, would achieve this goal. This particular community of students means a lot to me, and they have expanded on their skills, talent, and abilities throughout the years. We have worked together to create a program built around trust, fun, and the ability to make mistakes and take risks. I can't wait to see the high-quality program we can continue to develop going forward. I hope that you've gained some insight into what a music program at Ben's has potential to become, and the impact it already has and could have on the students and community. Adding 0.2 FTE to the current position, a small increase of time, resources, and support could help achieve our common school and district goals, provide adequate time for teacher planning and preparation, and would have a tremendous impact on the needs of this community. Thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
I'm Terry Gates. I am from Bakersfield. I have grandchildren in Bakersfield. I have grandchildren in Sheldon. I have grandchildren all over the place. And for my grandchild in Bakersfield, the music program was a savior for her. She was bullied to the point of not going to school for months. She then got the lead part in a play. Her confidence, it went from below 0 to above 100%. It was amazing to see her on the stage, and to think that we don't enrich programs like that really is devastating, because I can think of so many other things that we could get rid of in our district that doesn't benefit children. And I'm just wondering why the board wanted to cut it in the first place. Can anyone answer that?
Can I just correct a misconception?
Yeah.
Yes. There is no cut. Allie has been 0.8 and she's asked to go up to 1.0. There's no cut in any programming.
So it's increasing it.
Yeah.
That's what the
Okay.
request is.
Okay. So why don't we want to increase it, I guess? Because I also have children in Sheldon, grandchildren in Sheldon, and it breaks my heart because I have a granddaughter down there that loves the stage. She has not had music since they moved there because they only go to 4th grade. So, we're all in the same district, but I don't know how the Sheldon board feels here, but I sometimes feel like Sheldon's looked at as the redheaded stepchild, but that's just my opinion. I do not see the same programs going on for those kids as what I do in other schools. So I would like to see more music in Sheldon. I would love to see our Bakersfield program continue and further on, because it is a beautiful program. And it is a way for kids to learn how to public speak, how to get up in front of a crowd and talk, how to, there's so many things that music hits besides just singing and performing. There's a reading component, there's a math component. There's so much more to music than just, let's see if we can get these kids to sit down, behave, and sing. So I hope you reconsider and get her full time, and I hope you look at Sheldon and see why those kids cannot have music. Because the K through 4, it's a great program. I do not want to knock what they do have, because I just went to their Christmas concert. It was absolutely amazing. The guy is wonderful. But let's offer it to everybody. K through 8, we are a K through 8 school system.
I hope you stay for the next part, Terry, so
I
that
am.
you can see some of the data that we're gonna share. It'll help.
So that's my spiel on that.
Thank you. Are you,
Sorry.
no worries, are you interested in speaking for public comments?
I just wanted to listen, but I got lost on my way
Oh,
here.
sorry.
There's a seat right there.
There's a seat in the corner over here,
Thank
please
you.
feel welcome to slide in. All right, thank you, everyone. So that brings us to Lynn's report.
Oh. That's gonna take a minute because I didn't sign in. Can you send me the link to this or invite me?
Oh, yes.
Just
I
make
don't have to wait.
I know, right? It's just terrible.
the worst sound
It
of
is
my
the
day.
Shut it off. I'm trying, I'm trying, but it won't be so difficult.
It's muted. I don't have it yet though.
I just sent.
Let me find it another way. It did this earlier in a meeting that someone sent something across the table and it took like 5 minutes to arrive. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm in for you.
Turn it off. Where's it
Okay, can I share my screen?
Let's do it.
Sorry, didn't know I was gonna have to do this. Is it Chrome tab that I wanna push?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna talk tonight, I'm going first because I wanna make sure Morgan has, you have all the information before Morgan brings you through the budget conversation. So where we're at tonight is we're bringing you a budget and you're having to make decisions about what's gonna land in that budget, what's gonna stay, what's gonna be added potentially, and what's gonna be removed potentially. So we're gonna walk through some of the audit information just to remind you of some of the things that you asked me to look for in previous minutes. So before we get started, just wanna remind you that this board has 839 students across the NMV schools. So my lens as a leader when I'm thinking about what it is that we're building into the budgets is I have to look at it through the lens of opportunities for 839 students and how are we looking at that, what metrics are we setting for those students. That's also your role as board members. It is, you have to get to the elevation where you can look at what's best for all the students within the organization. So to give us some context, and it's another reminder, one of the things we said when we were forming our board was that all of these students are all of our students. So it's a good reminder for us to just keep in mind. So this gives you some context about the size of our 4 schools within NMV. So in Sheldon, they have just over 42% of our students. Montgomery has 18% of our students. Berkshire has 22%, and Bakersfield has just under 18% of our students. So you asked me to do an audit of the electives that we offer within FNESDO. So I've done that audit, and this is information that I shared at a previous board meeting where we took a look at. This is representative of the amount of weekly school level elective time that we have in each of these 4 schools. And I know that text is really, really small, So when you look on the far left side, that represents Bakersfield at the top, then Berkshire, then Montgomery, then Sheldon. So it'll always be, you're gonna have several graphs to look at, it's always gonna be in that order, alphabetical. Across the top for this chart, the pink represents art, the next green is guidance, orange is health, only in Bakersfield, there isn't anything in the other schools. Purple represents library, yellow represents music, and green represents PE. So we have talked a lot about opportunities and what we want for our students, and if money were no object, we would be looking at all of the programming across all of our schools. Money's only one factor in this conversation. There's a delicate balance that we have to find between the opportunities that we want to build in and what that does to the amount of instructional time we're able to offer in the core content areas, in particular in math and in literacy. Because there's a direct cause and effect relationship. As you increase one, you have to decrease something else. So we have to keep that in balance and try to find the sweet spot of how much should we offer before we get to a tipping point that puts us in a place that reduces an opportunity in another way. So we took a look at all of the 4 schools, and I pulled this apart for literacy and math instruction, and you'll see a few different data points. So what this is representing is the amount of weekly school level literacy instructional time across all of our schools. This represents the amount of weekly school level math instructional time in each of our schools. So you can start to see between these two that as we increase from the first slide, we have a lot more electives that we're choosing to spend resources on a lot more electives in Bakersfield than we are in the other schools. So we're starting to see a trend line that impacts the amount of instructional time in the content areas. So in kindergarten through grade 2, when we look at the literacy instruction, same graph, and there's 2 pieces there. One says ELA and one says foundation/word work or word study. And some, like Sheldon, that's embedded within their instructional time, so that's why they don't have a pink showing there. In this next graph, this is literacy instruction for 3 through 5 students across the district. And then literacy instruction for 6 through 8 students across the district. And we'll shift to math. So math is the amount of weekly school level math instructional time for K through 2 students. And then this is for 3 through 5 students. And then 6 through 8 students. So when we look at the, first of all, I just want to say, I guess I want to say it to you, Allie, I've had the opportunity to be in your class, and I know what kind of a music educator you are. And I tremendously value the work that you're doing in Bakersfield, and love how you've been able to revive this program. So this is no reflection of that. These are the data points. I just wanted to make sure I said that to you. So this is where we currently are. So I took a look at this data and just said, okay, if we were calculating how much music instruction we have per teacher, how many students, what's the ratio, what would it look like? So in Sheldon, because they have a full-time music teacher, it's 1 to 353. Now this week it's 363 because they've got 10 new students. In Bakersfield with a 0.0, that equates to 1 music teacher per 185 students. In Berkshire, they have 3 days a week with a music teacher, so that's 1 to 313 students. And in Montgomery, they have 2 days a week for music, so that is 1 to 375 students. So when we look at what's in the budget, proposed is the increase of 0.2 FTE in Bakersfield. So that reduces that FTE to 1 to 148, which is less than half of what all of the other schools have.
Has that been done for PE or guidance or art or any of the other areas? Because it would be interesting to see as well.
We haven't done this level because this is something we just started working on, but we literally made a plan today to start looking at it across all areas.
Because I'm looking at the 2 schools I work at, and 2 schools have a full-time PE teacher, very different size.
Yeah, I engaged and I'm not supposed to yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm gonna try to put myself back. So that is what happens to the ratio when you put the 0.2 in there. So if you look at this through the lens of, is that the metrics? Because as a board, you have to determine how you make your decisions. So if 1 to 148 is the metrics, what you'd have to do to determine, if you wanted to use that to determine access to music educators, that would mean to get even close to what you'd be offering in Bakersfield, you'd need to offer another 1.0 in Sheldon, another 0.4 in Montgomery, another 0.6 in Berkshire. And so that instead of adding 0.2 to the budget, you would, in order to make that similar, you'd have to add 2.2 to the budget. So I'm not gonna encourage you to make the decision at this point in the meeting. You've gotta go through your budget process first, but one thing I just wanna leave you with is the decision about whether or not you add this is yours. It belongs to the board. So I think that if you as a board believe that there is an inadequate access to music in Bakersfield, if that's what you believe, I recommend that you increase by 0.2 FTE for the music educator at Bakersfield. And just to confirm, this is not a reduction. Ally has been 0.8 for the past 4 years and has asked to be increased to 0.2. So the other wonder I have is, or is there another scenario at play here where we're worried that we'll lose someone who has proven to be a really highly valuable educator, and if we can't offer her full-time work. So if that is the case, I would encourage the board to direct me to increase the educator's time to 0.2 FTE and task me with creating a plan to improve access to music education in one of the other NMV schools. Okay. So I'm gonna,
Lynn, what do you mean by that? That the 0.2 would be in another school? Not necessarily based. The other piece that, I don't know if I can speak at this time, that in the last 10 years in Bakersfield, we've lost 3 good teachers who were 0.8 music to other districts. So that is certainly a very legitimate concern.
I think Lisa was trying to say something.
Yeah, I had a question, Lynn, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you could go back to that, next to the last slide you showed said, if we're concerned about losing a highly educated teacher, then to give the 0.2 increase and look at one of the other NMV schools, but how are you getting one of the schools? Because that brings me back to the whole discussion we had about STEM in one of the NMV schools and not the others. So which school would you look at? Would you look at Montgomery, for instance? Because they only have, no, sorry, it wasn't.
Oops, I have to go back one more, sorry.
Yeah, so, would it be the school that has the least, favorable ratio, and that would be Montgomery?
I think that it would be incredibly close between Sheldon and Montgomery, because Sheldon's actually, they've gained 10 students since I built this slide. So it's 1 to 363. So I think I would have to work with the principals to determine what the need is and how we could utilize Ally's gifts in one of those schools.
Because Eric Ho shared and he's already
Okay,
full.
thank you.
We can't mess with them.
Do you want me to keep it up? Or?
So how does it work that, Sheldon's not equal to anyone? Because everyone else is offering K through 8 and they're only offering K through 4.
We have K through 8 music.
Yeah.
The concert for the 4th through 8th graders was K4 had their concert in the day, 4th through 8 had their concert at night, the next night.
You're talking band.
Yeah, and they have classroom music once a week, just like every other grade. They just don't do a singing concert, but they do all singing in their classes and composition and, I'm sorry, should I be done?
It's generally we'd wanna stay on target here.
Yeah, but we do have K8 music
Okay.
built into the schedule.
Can you share my slides? So I'm going to shift into the rest of my agenda before we go into the budget conversation with Morgan. So under personnel, we have nothing that is actionable. I'm going to go by what's up there because I just opened last January's. That is not
I
gonna
was like,
work.
wait a minute, we do this.
I saw two people's names on there that, yeah. So there is an action item in Berkshire. Rhiannon Fleckenstein has been hired to support the literacy, I'm sorry, I can't speak here, as the literacy interventionist at Berkshire, so I'd ask the board to make a motion to approve that.
I'll make that motion, do that by roll. Lisa,
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Miranda, John,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
Under resignations, Randa Longway, custodian at Berkshire, and Tanya Jacobs, custodian at Montgomery, have both let us know that at the end of this year, they'll be finished. I don't know if Tanya is retiring, but I know Randy is.
I think she is.
She is, okay. So that's just informational. We have a retirement notification from Heidi Chamberlain. She is the 0.4 FTE art teacher in Berkshire, so I would ask the board to approve Heidi's retirement notification.
I can make that motion.
Thank you, Erin. By roll, Lisa,
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Miranda, John,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Emily, and Mary is an aye.
And just as a reminder for anyone who is watching, we still have a paraeducator position open at Bakersfield, an enrichment teacher and a paraeducator position at Berkshire, a Montgomery paraeducator. We're still looking for someone to serve in the role of technology support person that does not require a license or degree, someone who is good at some of the IT stuff and working with the devices is essentially what we're looking for. Paraeducators and a BT, behavior technician paraeducator at Sheldon. In NMV, we have not been able to fill the health teacher position since last year, so that still remains open. Continue to have hope that someone watches these meetings, and there's gonna be a December graduate out there who hears us. All right. So I'm not gonna ask you to act on this piece right now, but generally in January of each year, I come to the board and I say it's that time of the year where you have to decide whether or not you're going to notify the union of a contemplation of a reduction in force. So historically, the board has always instructed me to send that notice to the union just as a measure of protection in the event that the budget is voted down. So what that means is, it doesn't mean that you're committing to reducing any positions, but it is a notification of the board that if the circumstances necessitate it, that there might be a possibility that you would have to reduce some positions. So last year, the board chose not to send this notice because of the staffing shortage and everything that we were contending with. So we can come back to this at the end of the meeting. I think we need to go through the budget conversation, and then we'll come back to that. So we have an executive session that I'll ask you to talk about at the end of the meeting, so if we can move on from that one. Nothing under student. And then in terms of support staff negotiations, I'm just giving you a quick update. We have not begun. We have 3 meetings in the book, January 10th, I believe the 22nd, and March something, 11th maybe? It's the second week in March. So we're about to shift gears into the support staff negotiation process, and we'll keep the board updated when we return for this February break, or for this February meeting. So I'm gonna ask Maureen to help me a little bit with the PCB piece. So we now have 2 schools who have been identified as having PCBs in them. Just as a reminder, Bakersfield and Montgomery dodged this, let's call it an opportunity, because their buildings were built more recently than all of the other buildings within our school system. So we don't have to worry about those other 2 schools. Berkshire was the first in the system to test positive for PCBs. So between you and Gavin, could you give us an update on where Berkshire is?
Sure. The recap is that there were 2 rooms and a stairwell that were identified as having elevated levels. We did a deep cleaning in the 2 classrooms, put an air purification unit in there, and retested to see if we would be able to bring the levels down to a point where we wouldn't need to do remediation. Those tests have been collected, those tests haven't been released yet. We're expecting those any day now. So the 2 rooms have not been used since we got the notification, and Gavin is hot to put them back into circulation.
That's an understatement.
So this is what we're hearing from our counterparts across the state who are further along in the PCB process than we are, is that this is quite a lengthy process. We can't proceed with anything, like it can't be out of order. Everything has to be done with notice. As you can imagine, there's a lot of legal issues surrounding PCBs in schools. So we just have to make sure that we're giving notice for everything, and we have someone from the Agency of Natural Resources who's kind of guiding each step along the way for us. So all of the testing is taking way longer than they tell you it's going to take. And then once we figure out what the source is for the testing, then we'll have to get in the queue in terms of remediation, and that is not quick either.
Right. And then in addition to testing taking a while, there aren't that many consultants out there who do this sort of work. So the one that we're working with, we're trying to get him into Sheldon to do an initial look in Sheldon. Basically everything from the gym back, so the boiler room, the locker rooms, and the kitchen all have slightly elevated levels. They're okay for everyone except for pre-K students in the kitchen and in the 2 locker rooms, and those are areas that they don't use anyway. So there's no immediate restrictions on use of the building, but we still have to do our due diligence to figure out where the source is. And so once we can get our consultant on site, generally what happens is they'll work with us and the DEC and kind of do a more thorough assessment and say, okay, we think that the likely sources are X, Y, and Z, and then instead of air sampling, we'll do we'll pull some samples, whether it's caulking or tile, mastic, paint, whatever it is. We'll pull those and then send those off to be tested, and then wait a long time for those results. But the advantage in Sheldon is that the levels were so low that we don't have to change any occupancy.
And the gym itself, I believe, was just under the threshold, so it didn't, that's not considered to be elevated or actionable, but it is, there's a formula. If it's a certain percentage, if it's within a certain percentage of that target area, you have to retest quarterly. So that's where we're at in the gym piece, but everything is just in that one area, and there's no action levels that require us to move students around. So we're thankful about that, because some of our counterparts are dealing with dozens of classrooms in schools, actually more in some cases, that are having to be closed, and gyms and whole wings, and so anyway. Next is just information about the start of the legislative session. So today is January 3rd, I believe. They have returned for the legislative session, effective today. We have actually today's the 4th, right? Third. Okay, so Lisa's, I'm guessing Lisa's in Montpelier, would be my guess. I gave you all a link to the legislator contact information. There were, if you looked at that earlier in the week, Lisa pointed out that there was some redistricting that I had not captured in that contact information, so I think that's been corrected at this point. So if you, as you're following what's happening within the legislative session, all of your contact information is there. You can see all of the representatives and the senators that represent each of the communities, because it's not neat and clean. We don't all have the same representatives. Each towns are a little bit different. So they're all there. And I just wanna remind board members that you're gonna begin receiving regular updates from the Vermont School Boards Association about what's happening in Montpelier. And I do encourage you to read those updates. There's I expect there's going to be quite significant legislation that involves education that is being contemplated in Montpelier this legislative session. This is the second year in the biennium, so I'm expecting that people are gonna wanna move some of this work through. So I will do my best each month to keep you updated about it, and Morgan's usually really good about that as well, so we'll tag team those updates as we move into the legislative session. So as part of, oops, I'm a slide ahead. So annual meeting preparation, do we wanna talk about that at this point, Morgan, or are you gonna address that?
We can do it after
Okay.
the budget.
So we'll move right on to the next part. So we have, in our board monitoring plan, one of our goals is centered around SEL, and one of the elements of SEL that we look at is attendance for students. So I'm gonna give you some access to some graphs, and I don't know how this is gonna show up there or not, but you have it in your board notes. So what I did was I pulled from our EduClimber data some information about what our attendance looks like by school. So I'll just let you know across it's not alphabetical this time. So it's Montgomery on the left, then Bakersfield, Berkshire, then Sheldon. So what this is, it gives you a rate between 88 and 96% for your attendance rates. So you can see that there are two lines. One is full attendance rate, full day attendance rate is the blue, and the orange is from the student information reported attendance rate. And I think that's if you have a partial day. So that's why you have two lines. So that's by school. The next graph I thought was interesting, and I didn't put this in order, so if I had put this in order, it would have looked a little different. But there's the same thing, percentage on the left. This is by grade level, and you can see it starts over with the 3-year-olds, and then the 4-year-olds, and then kindergarten through 8th grade for your district. So you can see the trend lines as the kids get a little older, they start to dip down a little bit. You gotta love those first graders. They are coming to school. And then this next one I also thought was interesting, it's by weekday. So you can see across the bottom Monday and Friday. So we can see that by the time we get to Friday, we see a dip. Lots of kids come to school on Wednesday and Thursday. Those seem to be pretty popular days.
What's going on with Tuesday?
One of the next slide is by ethnicity, and so if you look, this takes all of the information that's in our student management system. So this identifies on the left, American Indian, multiracial, Caucasian, students who decline to specify. I don't know why there are two there, I'll have to look, the other one is not specified. I don't know the distinction there, Hispanic, African American, and Asian. So you can start to see the data disaggregated in that way.
I think that, the two differences are the not specified is they didn't click on anything, and there is something that says I decline.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what it was.
That makes sense.
Lynn, do we have anything on grade by day to show us are the older kids not coming a certain day?
I don't think I can do that in this. I can look, Arlene.
Okay.
I might be able to.
Okay.
I can't, the way I pulled this report, it only gave me those selections across the top, but I might be able to search in a different way.
Okay.
It's something I can think
Be
about doing
interesting.
back next time. So by day, by grade.
Yeah.
And then the last one is by gender. So seeing if there's any difference between the attendance rates for girls on the left and boys on the right. And there's slightly higher attendance rates for your boys than for your girls. It's not the same in the other district. It's interesting to look at these in both lenses. So that's all I have for you tonight. Unless anybody had any questions, I didn't say that part.
I'm thinking of
Is it okay if I speak?
Actually, really, it's not. I feel badly saying so, but this is that delineation between a public meeting and a meeting of the public. And so, but certainly at the end of the meeting, if you had some questions for Lynn or for any of us after we've adjourned, we'd be delighted to chat with you.
I can handle that.
Okay, wonderful.
That's okay.
Okay, so that brings us to the big budget discussion. Morgan, you are up.
Slideshow. Thanks. Given that we have 7 times as many visitors here as we did at our annual meeting, I will speed through the slideshow because this may be the only opportunity. But board members, you've all seen this before. Go to the next one. So since our last meeting, the long-term ADM, which is your student count, is almost final. That'll probably be final by the end of this week. And it has certainly stabilized in terms of the numbers that we've been seeing from the ALE. The CLA common level of appraisal data dropped last night, and I did share that with the board members, and that's certainly been getting a lot of press as well. And so that brings us to tonight, which is when we planned to finalize our budget. If we do not, we will need to hold a special meeting and do it sometime in the next probably 2 weeks in order to meet the requirements for warning the vote on town meeting day. Again, walking you through the annual meeting warning, at our in-person meeting in mid-February, we will elect a moderator and a clerk again. Article 3 is new, and this is the article that would allow us to vote those 2 positions by ballot, and so then everything would be on town meeting day. And it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of your informational meetings before town meeting day, because you don't need to have the district clerk there to check people, and you don't need to have a moderator there to run the meeting. And so you'll see that on your warning. We do need to schedule an informational meeting sometime after February 24th. This is not something that we've done in the past, but when I reached out to your council to figure out what we needed to put on the warning to move those 2 positions, he recommended doing that. And this is the same way that municipalities run it for town meeting day elections. So at the end of the meeting, I'll ask you all to pull out your calendars and we can discuss that. This is one where you do not need quorum of the board. You do not need to have your district clerk or a moderator. So it's something that a subset of the board could run with the administration if that was easier. Again, there are 3 positions up for election. Kat is up in Montgomery, Lisa's up in Berkshire, and Emily is up in Sheldon. If there are people out there listening who are interested in running, they can reach out to me or to Emily Fecto, who's the district clerk, about getting a petition and the other paperwork you need to submit. And I've shared that with all the board members whose seats are up.
There's also information on our website about becoming a board member.
Great.
Is paperwork through you guys or the town clerks?
It can either come to me and I will get it to the district clerk, which is the town clerk in Berkshire currently, or you can send it directly to her.
Lisa and myself.
General budget objectives, these are the 3 board goals that we've talked about for the last couple of years. And so we like to put that out there as we start getting into some of the discussions around positions and investments in the budget. Your enrollment figures, this is October 1 enrollment for the first 5 years on the left, and then it's enrollment projections from 2024 out through 2028. So when we develop these in October, seeing likely increase coming in Sheldon, Berkshire and Montgomery relatively flat, Bakersfield sliding a little bit. I will say to you all, and I've said this before, that once we get another year or two out of this set of numbers, we won't have that COVID dip that's kind of throwing everything off with projections. So you're seeing from 19 to 20, we lost a lot of kids, and that was the first year of COVID. Additional considerations, so these are some of the factors that went into developing the budget. As we've seen in the past, more kids with social emotional needs. This is the first year of the revised pupil weights under Act 127, and I'll talk about that more later on. The COVID funding expires in the budget year that we're building. So in the draft that you saw this morning and that I'll be sharing on the screen, there's one position that was pulled out of the ARP ESSER grant and put into the local budget, in addition to a handful that have been pulled out of the ESSER budget and put into the supervisor union budget. PCB remediation is still a question mark. We know that we will have some work to do in both Berkshire and Sheldon. We suspect by the time we have that work done, the initial allotment of money from the legislature will be gone.
So the state partners that we're working with are still saying that the costs of the testing and the remediation are included, but unless the legislature moves this year to add additional money into PCB remediation, Morgan's right, there's likely not gonna be any money left for us because there are much bigger projects ahead of us.
Half of it's gone to Burlington, of the remaining amount, a big chunk is going to Cabot, which had some pretty significant needs, and it's part of the issue is where you are in the queue, and so since we're all backed up with the testing, we can't really get in with a solid estimate until we know what we're dealing with, and the whole state is in that boat. Health insurance premiums up 16.4%. We are in negotiations with the support staff union, so that's food service, custodians, paraeducators. I believe I have enough money for a settlement in your budget, but we will not know that until this has already gone to press. Our last meeting with them is mid-March, and hoping to have it done by then. And then again, the large increase in high school students. We picked up 2 8th graders since we last were looking at this slide, so I've increased your high school tuition a little bit from the last version that you've seen. I will walk through again the staffing changes as they are proposed currently in this budget and try to remember, I think, the 2 changes since you saw it last. Currently there's a 1 day a week increase to Bakersfield in music and a 2 day a week increase for the family engagement coordinator, and that's a position that's coming in for an ESSER. In Berkshire, the addition of a half-time health teacher. We've removed a 1.0 interventionist, 3 days of a family engagement coordinator. 2 of those days are currently covered out of ESSER, and then the addition of an assistant principal there. In Montgomery, bringing the PE teacher up to full-time to cover health as well. Addition of a little bit more than 1 paraeducator, 1 day a week of a family engagement coordinator, and that's currently covered under ESSER. And then bringing the second custodian up to full-time. In Sheldon, the addition of a health teacher, either a STEM or a Spanish teacher, but a second unified arts teacher, 4 days a week of a family engagement coordinator, and so the district as a whole would have 2 full-time coordinators. And then the addition of somebody who would be split between part-time office assistant, part-time paraeducator, and sort of a permanent sub. District-wide, the addition of an SRO. We have removed the health teacher, which we've not been able to fill as a district-wide post, and that's feeding some of the increases at the district level, or at the school level. Removal of the tech integrationist, that's a position that we moved into the SU budget, and so that person who does exist will be covering all of our schools rather than just the 4 NMV schools. And then we have also, from the last budget that you saw, removed an additional paraeducator from Berkshire. So that's one down from December. So this will be how the article reads on your ballot to approve the budget, and tonight, and if not tonight, in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna change all those NNNs into real numbers. You've seen these charts before. This first one is on the budget that we're going to consider. It's split out in terms of what we buy. So roughly half of it is spent on your own employees. Third is salaries, health insurance, other benefits, and that's that red half on the right side. On the left side, you'll see that almost 30% light blue section is the tuition that you pay out, primarily for high schools, although there's some pre-K tuition in there. And then the other pieces are relatively small. You've got property, supplies, utilities. Other services is largely the SU assessment, which covers your food service, your transportation, your special ed teachers, as well as superintendent's office, my office, and some of those other ancillary services. This next one is looking at the same budget by what we do. So about almost 3/4 is direct instruction. That's the green section. The blue section is sort of the support services. So there are a couple little lines for student support. Instructional support would be professional development, librarians, technology, school administration is your principals. Central services again is the SU, and so that'll be food service, special ed, transportation. Pulls out your buildings and grounds, debt service, pretty small chunk. At the SU board, we've started to do this as well, and these are, we're looking at it in ways that we haven't in the past. So for this one, what I've attempted to do is to take the SU budget, the NMV budget, and the Enosburg-Richford budget, and combine them and take out any duplication. So the fact that you guys write a big check to Enosburg-Richford every year for high school students, kind of pulling that out and trying to show, again, what we're doing as a full unit, as an SU, as if we were a school district. So in this one, it's about half direct instruction, pulling out special ed and vocational next. Student support, things like guidance, nursing, instructional support is library, professional development. General administration is board and superintendent. School administration are your building principals. Central services are things like the folks that work for me, HR, technology, buildings and grounds, similar to the local budgets. And then I've also pulled out transportation and food service in there. One of the things that I'm trying to do now that we have this information is start looking at some of our neighboring districts to kind of see how we are stacking up. There are some things that we spend more in that should be pretty obvious. So things like school administration, buildings and grounds, got a lot of small schools, so you're paying for a school, you're paying for a principal, and you're kind of running those. Central services, superintendent's office, and special ed, we all are doing quite well comparably on. Food service is kind of hard to compare because we're running it ourselves and very few districts are still doing that. And then the next one. That's fine, we can do that one. Act 127, so we've talked about this quite a bit. This is the change that's causing a lot of discussion in different ways in a lot of districts across the state. This was passed a few years ago, and to lay the groundwork, in Vermont, there's a constitutional requirement for equal access to funding. So this came out of the Brigham decision in, I think, 1998 or 99. The way that we do that is to adjust student counts. So the state, under Act 60, recognized that different students cost more to educate than other students. And they attempted to equalize the playing field between districts that maybe had more kids in poverty, more kids in sparse areas, more kids who are not hearing English in the home. The weights under Act 60, while they were well-intentioned, were not really research-based. There was not a lot of data, or there was not a lot of data that they found, and so they were making some guesses as to, we think this kind of kid should cost this much more. Act 127, the impetus behind that was to correct that. So UVM was hired, they did quite a bit of research, and based on that research, they changed those weighting factors pretty dramatically in some cases. So the concept is still the same. We're trying to figure out which students cost more to educate and benefit districts that have those types of students. In theory, districts who are advantaged, so those that are picking up more students, as NMV is one of them, should be able to raise more money for the same tax rate. So that money could be spent in theory on those kids who have been historically shorted. Disadvantaged districts obviously are seeing a big hit in this first year, and they've been given a 5-year soft landing, so they don't have to adjust their budgets to get to the same tax rate all at once. The problem with that is that soft landing is in the form of a tax cap, so their taxes can only go up a certain amount each year. We still need to raise that money to educate those kids in all the districts because we're a statewide system. And so the pressure on the yield is in part that all of us are paying for those districts to have that soft landing. In theory, that landing phases out in 5 years.
So that was one of the things, if you could go back one slide, Courtney. That was one of the things that when we send this budget out every year, we get that graph. Are you gonna go to that graph? Is that in the slideshow? I'm still your thunder, then I'll wait till then.
There's that other chart.
There's that other chart. So then, back to the SU budget. We've also been trying to tease out where we spend money as an SU. So there's a concept that it's all somehow spent in central office in this little building right here. So we pulled out, you can see that starting from the top, we're showing the parts of the budget that can be addressed directly to schools. It's primarily special educators, SLPs, behavioral technicians. We then have a big section for food service and a big section for transportation, which they're school-based, but we don't really have a way to say which school is benefiting from which one. Kind of between 11 o'clock and midnight, those are the sort of the separate schools that we've created. So the Rise and Steps are the 2 alternative programs that Michelle Taberge has piloted, and then the FPA is the Flexible Pathways Academy, which came out of the lessons we learned in COVID. That 1/3, which I have listed as CO, is the central office. A lot of that is still really school-based, but we are not tracking people such as your instructional coaches as saying that this, Marty's going to spend 1 day in this school, 2 days in this school, and 2 days in this school. Or your English language learner teachers are not kind of set to a specific schedule where we can identify them.
So we're deploying based on need, and that need adjusts as, Michelle Irish has presented to the SU board members, where they've been able to see that sometimes the fluctuation with our emerging multilingual learners is pretty substantially swinging from one school to another repeatedly. So those are employees that we keep in that portion so that we have the flexibility to deploy where the need and the resource is.
And the 3 folks who are on the SU board can attest that there was a long discussion of that. So we now have in the SU budget, we've increased our English language learner teachers, so we now have 2 in the budget instead of 1. We very easily could have put 1 in the NMV budget and 1 in the ER budget, and made the SU budget look smaller and the district budgets, the direct service look a little bit bigger. But we know that those are families that move quite a bit, or kids go from, a school in Montgomery to Enosburg High School when they graduate. And so having them at the SU allows us to, as Lynn said, kind of deploy those resources rather than have an EL teacher in one district twiddling their thumbs because their caseloads moved, across the county to the other district. The other advantage of doing that, and we talked to the SU board about the 3 instructional coaches, is that we could say, instead of having 3 at the SU that are deployed to all of our schools, we could say each school's gonna try to hire a halftime coach. We've heard earlier that it's hard to get halftime people, and their function has been recently primarily working with new teachers, and those new teachers don't always end up in the same district. So, maybe Bakersfield gets lucky and hires a halftime coach, and then they have no staff turnover, and so that person's there and not doing anything, and Montgomery can't find anyone to drive the extra 20 miles, and they had high staff turnover, so they have need. So there are some areas where we are, we recognize that it makes the SU budget look bigger, but it's more efficient in the long run to hold them there. So projected tax rates, and we will be going into this in some great detail in a bit, but the draft that you saw earlier this morning had a proposed budget of $22,864,000. You will see a significant drop in the grant revenue, and we will go over that in a moment. And so education spending increasing pretty significantly. The weighted long-term membership is also increasing significantly, and that's the impact of Act 127. And so we are able to count for a lot more kids than we were in the past. So the per pupil ed spending, the comparison isn't really fair, but it's dramatically lower at $10,873. When you divide that by the dollar yield, which is the number that we all worry about in the beginning of December, which is the number that the legislature controls, that really is the last factor that sets your tax rate. When we take that tax commissioner's recommendation, we brought forward a budget today that was 1/10 of a penny below what it was last year in terms of the rate. We've made some assumptions. There's no fluff in here, and we'll talk about where you could affect some savings if you wanted to. But before the CLAs came out, we were thinking it was important to kind of bring you what's a flatline budget for the district, which is really kind of what the intent of Act 127 is. We got to that, and then we got the CLA figures last night, and so we're going to go to those in a moment. Let me go to the next graph. This is just a recap of the homestead tax rate. So this is the tax rate before the CLA is applied. FY20 is the first year because that's the first year that we operated as a unified district. And you'll see that there was some increases initially, and then some pretty significant drops, primarily due to the health of the education fund. And then we had proposed a flat line, at least as of this evening, this year. These are the impacts of the CLAs. And so if you look at that Bakersfield CLA, it's dropped from 81.58% to 74.25%. A drop of 7%.
Sorry to interrupt, do you think you could just remind people what the what the CLA stands for and why it's so impactful for the budget?
Yep, I can do that. So CLA stands for the Common Level of Appraisal, and this is the mechanism by which the state looks at a town's grand list and trues it up, because our towns don't update those on a regular basis. It's expensive to do, it's hard to find people to do that. So because we are now operating with a statewide property tax system, the state has an interest in going in there and saying, you know, property values in town X have been increasing, you haven't reappraised your town, so at an 80% CLA, you know, if you've got a house that's worth on the books of $200,000, what the state is saying is that house is really worth $240,000. So they're using the CLA to change the tax rate to raise the correct amount of money off of those properties. The state could have chosen, instead of applying it to this tax rate, they could have chosen to apply it to each of the property values. So when I'm looking at my property tax bill, instead of my assessment being 200, my assessment would be 240 or whatever the number is. That would kind of make your job as school board members a lot easier if we went that route, but for, you know, whatever the policy reason was, we didn't do that 20, 25 years ago. So is that enough? More? And basically a falling CLA is good because it means your property values in your town are going up, and this is the one slide in the one place where property values going up is not good because it's raising your tax. The other towns have seen a similar drop in the 7 to 8 range. You can go to the next slide and show the next two towns. Sheldon's was a little bit softer landing, although they started out a lot lower last year. When I look at the impact, or when I look at the CLAs and the changes across the state, we're seeing this trend everywhere. There are a lot of places that are in a lot worse shape than we are, which probably feels right. We know that properties are not going in rural Franklin County as quickly or for as much as they are in other places.
So the long and short, if we can go back to the slide before, when Morgan and I left the office last night, we were feeling pretty good about the budget that we were bringing you today, down 0.0012. And then on my drive home, he sent me a text and said the CLAs are in. This is the last piece of the puzzle that we've been waiting for, and they've been delayed, and so they just came in last night. So you could see with nothing else changing, just the property valuations, the CLA numbers changing, it's significantly changed what the tax rate based on our equalized residential tax rate spending for the district is, and then the CLA changed that factors widely across all of our towns.
And is there an acknowledgement from the state that on the one hand, it's like we have this wonderful opportunity with right sizing, you know, based on our population, and it put us in this incredibly advantaged situation for a hot minute to be able to, you know, expand, pull in all these ESSA positions, expand, and really kind of meet needs fully, and then just weeks later, the CLA numbers come out and basically just rip the rug right out from under us.
And so I think that the CLA is kind of ripping the rug equally or roughly equally out from everyone. Where I think the driver for this is that the amount we're spending on per pupil as a state is projected to increase. That yield number, which is kind of the most important one right now, is based on the projections that we're all making in November, so that could feed the December letter. We didn't have a lot of this data yet, so if there are districts that have historically been spending a lot of money, are seeing these same numbers and having these same discussions, and go back and say, well, we're gonna have to cut our budgets and bring our spending down, that's gonna drive statewide spending down, and that will help the yield, and it will help our tax rate. You won't know that before we're, you know, hiring for next year.
Don't know that until probably May.
The legislature probably won't have great data before they have to set a yield. You know, they'll know what budgets have passed, or they'll know which budgets have been warned and where they've been warned, and so they'll have that data. they'll know which budgets have passed. They may not know which budgets are getting that 5% cap or not, which is significant. Because to the extent that schools are not allowed that cap, more money will be raised for the same yield, and so that yield will come up and it'll bring that 115.03, if that's where you land tonight, it'll actually bring that number down, which then brings the post-CLA numbers down. But unless somebody's got a reappraisal in the works, and I don't think any of our 4 towns do, those numbers are set
We will be.
before June.
I'm not sure exactly when it's starting, but the state's pushing it.
I mean, that's something we can all do as residents in our community, is encourage our communities to do the reappraisal, because you can see by this numbers, it creates such a flux. So anything, I think what we've been told in the past, that anything that gets close to 80 or below
Right.
80 is when you need to start thinking about that reappraisal. So you can see, can you go back one slide? Those two, Montgomery and Sheldon, are now below 80, as are Bakersfield and Berkshire.
Yeah.
So I would hope that all 4 of our communities are seeing this and saying, like, how we need to reappraise. The problem is gonna be just like PCBs, there are only so many firms that do the reappraisal, so there's gonna be a backlog, because everybody in the state is getting these numbers right now. And they're all gonna be like, oh boy, we need to reappraise, so.
And that's pricey.
And it's enough of
The
an issue.
reappraisal's pricey, the town will have to.
It's enough of an issue that I know the legislature is looking at whether there's a statewide solution to doing the reappraisals, and I don't know what that looks like. I don't want to put Lisa on the spot, but I don't know if that went through your committee last year or not. But it is, that has gotten the attention of the legislature, because there aren't enough people to do all these towns when we have a real estate market the way it is.
That's correct, Morgan, but there was no solution that we came up with last year, so everybody's still in the same boat, that there aren't enough people to do the reappraisals, but everybody needs to do one.
And on the select board, they even told us that we had to have it done by a certain date. So, everyone's gonna do the same.
And so this is the black line is the NMV rate, or the district-wide rate, and here's where you can really see the impact of that CLA. And so we felt it as significantly from 23 to 24. From 23 to 24 as a district, we managed to drop our rate quite a bit, and the CLA still pushed it up a little bit. And this budget coming forward with a flat tax rate, you're kind of getting the full effect of those CLAs on the tax rate. This is the graph that Lynn had tipped and you folks had seen before. On this, it is a representation of the amount of per pupil spending, and this is the year that we're currently in, for each of the districts in the state. So it's a low of about 8,000 and change per pupil up to about 18,000 at the top of the graph. That first blue line on the bottom is where you are this year. The blue line right above you is where Enosburg-Richford is compared to the rest of the state. The black line in the middle is the Franklin County average, and then the black line a little higher than that is the statewide average. And those red lines are your fellow districts in Franklin County. My guess is that because of the increase in pupils in Act 127, if anything, we will stay the same or fall when we look at this next year.
So this is the place I was going to say, that historically, our schools in FNESU have been at or near the bottom in terms of per pupil education spending. And what this law has done is it has created an opportunity for communities who have typically been really low spending, because we want better educational outcomes for all students in Vermont, and in order to get there, we need to create different opportunities for them. So when we're spending that much per pupil, we can't offer the same opportunities that others are offering in other systems across the state. So even though this is, it was devastating to see the CLAs last night, the budget we have built has increased opportunities for our students and for the families that we serve. And so it's discouraging to have to be in this place where we're gonna have the conversation that we're about to have. But I just wanna remind everybody, this is where we are this year in terms of our education spending. And Morgan's, as he said, he anticipates we're not going to gain ground in terms of that. Next year, we're still gonna be, if you approve the budget the way it's written down here near the bottom, of per pupil spending.
We'll be discussing use of the fund balance and how much, if any of that, we want to ask the voters to put into the capital reserve fund. This is a required article that we will have on there. This is you asking for authority to borrow money while you wait for the state to send you the tax money. These are the town meeting day polling locations. I've not heard back from Bakersfield yet, but I'm fairly confident that those that location and times are correct for them, and the other 3 town clerks have confirmed those. So this will be for the board seats and the dollar items when we vote those. Is that it? You can go to the PDF. Oh, Kat's got a question.
Kat?
Yeah, I just had a question. Lynn, in your presentation earlier, you had shown us the numbers of each school of how many kids, and I was surprised to see that Berkshire is not much more than Montgomery and Bakersfield. And so I just wondered if you or Gavin maybe could just speak to the need in Berkshire for an assistant principal, and then kind of, just thinking like, is there kind of like a tipping point where you kind of go from 1 to 2, and so do we anticipate at any point in the foreseeable future that Montgomery and Bakersfield will also be having that need?
You take a crack at it first.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that there are a lot of factors at play when we talk about the needs of the population of the students in each of those towns, and I have the opportunity to be in all of our schools and look at the complexity of need, and we're in a situation in Bakersfield where the number is not as high as it once was, but the need is significant enough where we have pushed that forward as a priority within the budget. In terms of whether or not I'd be coming forward and asking you for something similar in Bakersfield and Montgomery, that wouldn't be something I would be considering unless something dramatically shifted in either of those communities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so there's no change from the draft that I shared with board and principals this morning. And you've got a hard copy if you want to make notes in front of you now. This is basically the overview of the budget, and this is what we will present in most of the informational meetings that we hold. So first line is direct instruction. A lot of those additional positions that you see in the slideshow are what's driving the increase here, as well as that health insurance change. You'll also note if you look at special education that number is down. The number of pairs is really roughly the same. This is just how we are classifying the time for those paraeducators. So I would say, looking at this, if we kept the people in the same line, that special education line would be up, call it $50,000, and then that direct instruction line would have that, be $400,000 less in terms of the increase. That's driven by changes with Act 173 primarily, and we can go into that in detail, but I don't know that it's really relevant to the budget conversation. Second line is tuition payments. So we talked about this. We've got a very small graduating class of 12th graders and a big class of 8th graders who are moving up. We have to make a lot of guesses here about where kids are going and where tuition rates are going, because tuition rates have not been set by any of the high schools yet. I'm assuming that everybody in 9th through 11th grade is coming back, going to the same school, and that those schools are gonna raise their tuition rates by 5%. I would feel more confident of that in a normal year. I don't know that 5% is enough, but we also don't know about kids moving in or out of the towns in those. In terms of your 8th graders, I'm assuming that 95% of them are gonna come back and show up at a high school where you have to pay tuition. We do scramble where we can to try to find out if there are custodial parents in the district where the kids are going to high school, because in that case, you have to pay for it. But as you heard in earlier meetings, we were within one kid in our projection for this year, and so that 95% guess seems to have held up. Minor increases in athletics and co-curricular, dropping down to support services. Got some increase in student support, a little bit of a decrease in instructional support. General administration, that's the board, again, a little bit of an increase there. None of these are really big movers until we get down to central services, which is the supervisor union assessment. We talked about some of the additional positions pulled in from ESSER. We've also at the SU seen big increase in transportation and in food service, specifically food costs in food service over the last 2 years. That's driving that increase, as well as you on the NMV side have more of the kids in our SU, a greater share of the kids in our SU than you have in the past. So your portion of the SU budget has also gone up. Buildings and grounds is up a bit. This is where we've got the SRO position built in. And as we've discussed in the past, we are also starting to build in some budget space for building repairs, whereas in the past, and this is inherited from when we were all separate districts, we only did repairs if we didn't have that many tuition kids come that year. We would use that money to fix things, trying to be a little more intentional around that, especially as we're looking at, waiting for reports on Berkshire and Sheldon in terms of PCBs. Transportation up a little bit, and then down to debt service, down a little bit as the interest payments drop each year on the existing bonds. So we go into the general fund revenue. There are two big movers here. So on the state revenue, that drop is due to the merger support grant going away. This is what used to be called the small schools grant. In the merger, Bakersfield and Montgomery were allowed to keep that small schools grant. Under Act 127, the state looks at the small schools grant and then looks at the additional weights that you get for being in a small school, and they give you the better of the two. So we're losing the small schools grant, but we're getting more kids down in that long-term ADM, and that's because under these new rules, we get to count Berkshire as a small school as well. Sheldon is too big, but three bodies where we get to get a little bit extra weight for those students. It's not a big difference, but it is to our advantage. And then the use of the fund balance, back at 5 o'clock yesterday when things were looking great, we were trying to come to you with a flat tax rate, and decided we would put forward a budget that asked the voters to put the entire $150,000 left over from 2023 into that capital reserve fund. This is, I'd say, the one painless or relatively painless area you have in terms of levers and moving your ed spending.
So we could shift there and use some of that to buy down the tax rate.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the section in blue below that are your projected tax rates and the CLA, so those were all part of the slideshow. I've got some areas grayed out because the way we're counting pupils is so different. I feel like a year-to-year comparison isn't really so useful for some of those. But I will say that in the commissioner's tax letter, he's projecting a 13% per pupil spending increase statewide based on the numbers we gave in November. What this budget with that 10,873 figure is roughly a 9% increase. So in terms of the increase in spending per kid, it's going up less than they're projecting statewide. That's why I think we're gonna drop in that graph the next year. That's not absolute spending, but spending once you're factoring the kids. Again, in terms of these numbers, and especially the four that impact your tax rate, I feel like the ADN numbers are pretty solid. The last few versions I've seen haven't really changed. CLA numbers I think are solid unless somebody moves very quickly on a reappraisal. The dollar yield is going to be set by the legislature in May or June, and then for discussion tonight is what we want to do with the education spending. Yeah, you could probably leave it up there for now. That's all I got. So I am ready to try to answer questions. I sent out the phone book of detail earlier today, and board members at least have copies of that in front of them. If you find some glaring errors, certainly that can help, but really, at this point, if you're gonna move this budget significantly, it's gonna be talking about either the SRO contracted position, the use of the fund balance, the money that we're tucking away in terms of fixing our buildings, or those positions that we laid out in the slideshow.
Well, it's not as rosy a picture as it seemed a week ago. Or yesterday, even.
Lisa just tried talking.
Lisa, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, it's okay, Mary. I guess I heard total silence, so I decided to open the discussion by saying I think that we should make use of our fund balance and do something meaningful with it this year.
Are you saying to put it in to offset, then bring the tax rate down, Lisa?
Possibly. So am I missing a slide, or did I miss a slide that shows that if we put a certain amount of the fund balance in, what the tax rate would be compared to not putting anything else in and putting the whole balance in? We've done that in the past. We've laid out those different scenarios. Do you have a slide?
Yeah, I don't have a slide, but I can tell you what the amounts are. And it's, what do you want to?
Yeah, it'd be nice to see it with both the fund balance and also pulling out that SRO position.
So while he's working on that, when we spoke earlier, we were running numbers, and to drive that tax rate down a penny in the post-CLA calculation, we've got to reduce by between $150,000 and $160,000. So if you put that fund balance back towards the tax rate, that brings you down a penny in each of those communities.
If you put the full rate through, yeah, it'll bring your pre-CLA rate down about 75.75 cents, so not quite a penny. With the CLA, it impacts each town differently, but it will get you at around an additional penny. So the SRO would be 2/3 of a penny once you hit the CLA. Completely taking out the additions to the building budgets would be about a penny.
I worry about taking out all that building
I agree.
money,
That's why we're
especially
pushing
with
that
an aging fleet of structures.
And the PCB stuff, that's.
Right,
sure.
right.
We can't, we're gonna be in trouble with something. Deferred maintenance, that's proven to be very costly, so.
Morgan, can you, I mean, if we're gonna get into a deeper conversation about, beyond just the positions we haven't filled, like the SRO, the SRO position or other positions, then it'd be helpful, I guess, to go back to those slides that was showing all the additional human resource positions and talking through if there are streamlining or efficiencies there that we might be able to meet. This may put us into territory where we're not quite able to do, pass the budget tonight, and would need to kind of have the discussion and then have, Lynn kind of connect with building leaders to really understand then if we aren't putting in some of these positions, what does that mean on the ground in each of the buildings? I think it just snowballs a little bit into probably a more comprehensive analysis than we might be able to kind of do tonight and come away with a passed budget. If we're now in this challenging position with the new CLAs about trying to balance the opportunities within the schools with taxes that are, we hear from people, can be really onerous for some of the people in our communities, and what does it look like to try to find that balance?
I appreciate that insight, Mary. I think if you choose to cut beyond the fund balance in the SRO, and we have to start getting into that with people, what I think would be valuable is if you give us a target of, we would like it to be another X $1,000 or X $100,000, and then task me going back, meeting with these 4 principals, and then we will do a look at prioritization and trying to figure out like what can we really afford to put in this budget, and we'll have to, prioritize what those needs are.
Lynn, can I ask for clarification on positions? The 2 ESSER positions, the
Family engagement?
family engagement coordinators, were those positions that were brought into the district when we get the ESSER funds and we didn't have before that?
Correct.
And one exists and one is new. So currently there's one person who's serving 3 of the schools. Sheldon doesn't have anyone. They had someone in a position a year or
So
two
we're going
ago.
from 1 family engagement person now that we're hoping to go to 2.
Yes.
What actually does that position entail?
It's a little bit different in each of the schools, so it's really based on what the needs are, but for some schools, the person really connects with families around attendance and, needs that are unmet with those families and try to support them so they can get the kids to school. There are other family engagement people who work with families if the kids are struggling with certain things at school, and they try to connect them to resources and maybe are the conduit sometimes between the school and the home to help with those situations. The communities that have the family engagement coordinators currently have expressed, favorable supports that are coming out of those positions, that the administrators were in the discussions where we talked about some of these and adding them back into the local budget.
I mean, it's tough because this is a very thoughtfully developed budget without an enormous amount of fluff really relative to what we know other districts and SUs spend around the state. I'll pause there. I see Lisa has a hand up. Lisa, you can go.
Thank you. Just looking at this, we're having tough conversations. I know just from my work in the legislature and dealing with many school districts and not just ours, that family engagement coordinators are a really helpful position to have. But I think if we have to make cuts, we need to go back to the basics, and that's direct instruction to students and what's benefiting students in terms of their, I would say, academic pursuits, and those teachers who are actually teaching subjects to students, because that's been our primary goal, is to educate students. All these other things that we do as school systems are asked of us by outside agencies, or the Agency of Education has come and said, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z, so we've stepped up and we've done that. But if we're gonna have to make some hard cuts, I would like to propose that we don't cut anything that's a direct instruction to a student.
I just think it's challenging though, because of the flip side of that piece is that without some of these roles that serve to kind of connect with families and families that are struggling and need support and services, is that if those children can't be successful in the classroom, then it doesn't matter how much direct instruction they are experiencing in the classroom, they're not going to be successful because there are all these deficits potentially at home, or needs that aren't being met in that social emotional kind of space. And that's that tension. I mean, I hear totally what you're saying, Lisa, and I would never advocate for cutting critical core instruction, but at the same time we want our kids to be successful, and so those other pieces are meaningful and significant as well. I mean, maybe there would be a way to phase in our increase in, say, the family engagement coordinator, if we only did one of the positions potentially in this budget cycle, and then let some of this sugar out as far as the CLAs and maybe some reassessments and maybe some adjustment on the state end. Just if there was a way to kind of be more judicious about which budget we put some of these positions into, with the intention that we recognize the need, the need for those positions.
I'm just curious around the family engagement coordinator, how, I'm sure whoever's in these positions are wonderful, empathetic human beings, but how successful are they in, if the goal is to link family students to outside services, is there a success rate with that? Because there are no outside services. So while it is a well-intentioned and amazing position, if it's not results-based and we're missing out from whether it's an SRO or a .2 music or whatever it might be, I think we really need to look at and ask ourselves the question, is anybody actually better off from this position?
I think that some of the resource that they get is that actual person, is what they're providing. But
right.
You went right where I was going to go before you started, and those of you that know me know I don't miss an opportunity to talk about mental health. Lisa, you'll see me in Montpelier again this year advocating. I've been doing this almost 30 years, and the world has changed around us in those 30 years. And I think sometimes, I get a little frustrated when I hear some of my community members, my friends and neighbors, talk about how schools have changed. I think the reality that we all need to come to terms with it is that the world has changed, and we're dealing with things in our communities, and those are showing up in our schools. And at a time where we're seeing increased mental health needs beyond anything we could have imagined even 10 years ago in our public schools, to Emily's point, the resources that used to be available around us from other partners have diminished greatly. We used to have access to alternative programs for our students, and there were in the beginning, when I was a principal, there weren't really wait lists. You could get in if a student had an intense need. That doesn't exist anymore. We've had to build our own programs in our schools, and what we're seeing is, to be honest, I don't know how to say it any more subtly, the dismantling of the mental health system in the state of Vermont, and their funding that's going and connected to the mental health system is having a dramatic impact on, when we're presenting to you this education budget, people need to understand that this is beyond education. We have to provide these services to kids, not only for the kids who are struggling, but so that all of the kids can access their learning, because the need is so significant. So I get pretty passionate about that, and that's work that I'll continue to advocate hard for in Montpelier's reform around that. So I understand the needs, and at the same time, I also hear teachers who are overwhelmed and really struggling on a day-to-day basis with the complexity of the needs of the students that they're serving. And that has changed. You know, when we used to talk about the least restrictive environment, can we meet the needs within the classroom, within the public school? What that threshold was back in the 90s, early 90s when I began teaching, versus where it was when I was a principal, versus where it is now, has gotten increasingly more complex, and we're serving students with really challenging intensive needs with little help from outside resources. So that's a piece that we have to keep in mind as we're presenting a budget, and some of those things are woven in there. So I'll want us to be thoughtful, and if we start getting to this level, or if you're wanting to approve tonight, but you're wanting to pick out pieces of this, I'd really like to engage our principals in what's the most urgent need, and how can we triage and prioritize what these pieces should be.
So Lynn, jumping on that, I just wanna go back to the music teacher in Bakersfield, and I think, you know, even if we did put the position in full-time and went 120% someplace else, you're not serving the emotional, social needs of kids, because there's not enough time in some other place to build those relationships, where the time spent all in one school really helps that social emotional, helps that I've got somebody I can talk to, somebody who understands me. I think the same thing about physical education. You know that's my background, that sometimes kids need that break in the day and somebody who's gonna allow them to be there. I see the athletic budget as 77,000, and I wonder, and again, sports is my thing, if that isn't a spot that is a K-8 school, we can say, what are we spending that on? Because we're not spending it on buses, and we have very few coaches that are paid, at least in Bakersfield, we don't pay many of our coaches. So,
We pay all of our coaches now.
not in Bakersfield.
Yes,
Yes.
they're all paid.
PTO might not be,
Well,
the younger,
You're talking about the younger
five-
kids?
I'm talking about any of, yeah.
No.
well,
5 through 8,
Yeah.
sometimes, the youngers, it's volunteer.
Yeah.
Younger.
We pay everyone if we're not, we
Yes,
should
yes,
be as a
yes.
principal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, that there was a time when we all volunteered as coaches, because it was needed. And so maybe that's a thought too, is that's a spot that we can look at, much as I hate to, because that is my, but like you say, you've gotta go put your money where you've gotta put your money, and,
I also think that the athletics piece, at least I can speak for Sheldon, they're kids who might not have access to anything else, but they are going to be at the basketball court every Saturday, and that is all they have. And that's where they're getting that extra social, emotional, they're getting an engagement coordinator through a volunteer coach. So I think the role of sports and athletics has also evolved into more of a bigger role.
and, but with that said too, I don't know if the transportation for sports comes under the transportation line, or if it came under athletics, but I know for a fact in Bakersfield, there are some kids who are not able to participate because there are not buses going to games.
Yeah. I know we used to have to pay for refs. Refs was a pretty hefty fee,
Yeah, we used to use
and
the
that's
door,
gone up
use the
because
door
nobody
money.
wants to ref anymore.
Right.
So there's that. I
We
know.
don't even collect money at the door anymore.
No, we don't have to either.
So Morgan,
I would say that those are relatively small items in a, $20-something million budget, and if you really wanna, if you're concerned about moving the tax rate, you're gonna need to look for bigger numbers. And I put up on the screen now, This is the same budget, but showing that full fund balance going into buying down the tax rate, so, instead of $1.1503, the equalized rate before the CLA would be $1.1427.
And I'll just say that everything else has gone up, and they can't expect education to go down.
Right.
The cost of a good education. We're already pretty low as far as state funding, as far as what we, our rate are very low.
Morgan, so what you just did with the projected tax rates, this is just factoring in now
Just taking full fund
the
balance.
full fund balance, not the SRO position.
Correct.
And how does it shift if we do pull out that SRO position?
What's SRO?
School resource officer.
Steve.
Which is going to be shared amongst all schools.
So you're talking like a cop?
Yes, potentially.
Sure, something.
And so I just wanted a little clarity, Lynn and Rhoda, about the music situation at Bakersfield. Because my understanding is that right now, it's not just I understand the desire for a full-time position, and that's clear to me. What's less clear is the equity piece around allocation of music electives across all 4 towns and all 4 schools, and the fact that it appears, to me at least from the charts, that there is diminished access to core content because of the preponderance of electives, and as far as how many hours per week kids are getting in their core. So yes, you have this kind of advantage in the musical realm, which I fully support. The arts, obviously, it's intrinsic to a quality, well-rounded education. But on the flip side of it, we have kids in Bakersfield who seem to me to not be getting as much core content instruction, and that matters also. The math, the literacy, also matter. And so my question is, if we're adding even more, going up to a 1.0 that stays, this is purely hypothetical, exclusively at Bakersfield, it's not helping to right size music equity across the district, one, and it's also not right sizing core content instruction for Bakersfield students so that they are getting the math and literacy time that students in our other 3 schools are getting.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is that allowed?
I
don't know if I'm allowed to talk or not.
When we're done this discussion.
We are gonna do another round of public comment
Okay.
at the end, and that would be a fine opportunity
Okay.
to weigh
It
in.
was just, okay.
So Mary, I would ask with that question, is how much time is spent on direct instruction? How much time is spent on what I need? How much time is spent on project time? And those kinds of areas that are not direct instruction, but are student time that is taking away from direct instruction in English and mathematics.
Actually, when should be direct instruction? When is
Um,
targeted intervention?
So that would be something, I guess, that would need to be looked at to see if it really is happening that way.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna answer Mary's question. That is a significant concern of mine, is that when we're looking at outcomes for students, I don't disagree, I've heard your arguments before in the past, Arlene, that there is some research that supports additional time in the arts can result in better academic outcomes
Yes.
down the road. but there has to be a balance,
Yes,
there's a
I
tipping
agree.
point there.
Yes.
And so Rhoda and I'm gonna share this piece, we've had some hard conversations in the last month or two around all of the schedules and where we can find time to beef up some of that instructional time, because I do have significant concerns about the impact of less instruction in math and less instruction in literacy in academic outcomes for students. So we're looking at all of it.
Good. And to me, those charts aren't indicative then of what is about to happen or is happening now. That's a picture of the past.
Correct. That, yes, they don't have the full of the new changes.
schedules.
Well, the changes, to be fair, have they gone into effect or are they going into effect at the end of the semester?
They're in process of effect currently.
Okay, so we're not quite there yet, it's an influx, they're trying to make some changes, but I'm giving you the data that we have had, and I know outcomes across all of the schools, and this is the concern for me that Rhoda and I have talked about is, that's one thing I will say to you as the instructional leader of the system, is that I want more opportunity for the arts, for those 800 and, I forgot the number, 800, what was it? What?
39.
839 students in NMV, I want that for all of them.
Yes.
But when we look at the whole picture, Arlene, I see a disproportionate amount of resources that are being allocated to our smallest school. We're choosing, as a system, to spend a lot of I don't wanna say spend, because it's not the money piece really for me. It's the time, like a lot of resources are going into that school, so those kids have increased opportunity in the arts, but decreased opportunity in the academic.
And I see that, but what also concerns me is, as a small school, we also have, one full-time teacher who does math and science, one full-time. That's one of those things that in a small school, it happens, I mean, I'll pick on my own daughter, her first grade has only 15 kids in it. Can you do an 80% teacher? No, so that's a problem with small schools. One of the things I hate to see, and we've lost 3 outstanding music teachers because of that 80%. And every time your program takes a dip, and then you've gotta get a new person in, they work hard to get it ready, and they say, I just can't keep doing this. Even to give them another school, why can't we get a health teacher in this district? Because nobody wants to work in 4 different buildings.
Which is why I wanna have PE and have health teaching.
Which is what we have.
Right.
I wanna give.
I have a .4 PE, a .4 music, a .4 art, and a .4 library, 2 days a week for these people, it's not easy to hire that.
No.
Yeah, this is the challenge of
Yeah,
small
it's a challenge.
schools with geographical distance between them. Kat?
I can see all sides, and I guess what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is like, what is our metrics for any of this? Like, we look at those charts, and yeah, it looks like Bakersfield is on this island in a way, but kind of the idealistic part of me is like, how do we know that isn't the right way? Like, if they are meeting the number of required, or the amount of required time for the core content, like, how do we know that isn't something that the rest of us do want to aspire to? So I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate because I can see it both sides, and I just don't feel like we don't really have a good, like every school has kind of done it so differently in a way and had its, its priorities, I guess. And so it's still kind of, I feel like we're just now like treading the waters of like how to become more equitable, but it still doesn't always look the same for each school.
And I don't think, Kat, that we should be trying to aim for the exact same for each school, but we do have to I think it's important that the board has a metrics, like to determine, is this, if we're looking at the whole picture, like, is this an equitable increase? Does this make sense when we look at the whole picture altogether? Like, it just on its face, I would love to say, sure, let's do that. I love Allie, I think she does a great job teaching. I would love to say that to you, but it's really hard to do that when you look at that data and you say, like, this is the amount of time, and I have concerns about the academic piece. like that's the piece that I think we have to keep in mind.
And sorry, yeah, my other clarifying question is, so is Bakersfield meeting the requirements for like the core content time?
Yes, and we are less than some of our other schools. So like we have what we set out in our original, framework around, we need 90 minutes of literacy. We do have that, but a lot of our other schools have 120, so they've done more than that.
I also think that, and I'm looking at this from a lens sitting, and we haven't brought this out yet because we've kind of been slow with the work that we did at the SU retreat. We were working hard with the portrait of a learner and looking at this idea of seat time being a little obsolete. And so it worries me that we are looking at that as a sole metrics, and I think that we need to spend some time. We're not ready for the elementary schools, we're really building that around middle and high school right now, but I know that we talked about that coming down into elementary schools, and we know that we can get some really good information and learning and teaching from our, I'm not gonna articulate this correctly, but you can build literacy and math skills in your essentials, like, and we've talked about this through the STEM piece as well, and wrapping that in that. I think that we have to build some metrics around how do we measure this, like how do we get to that place so that we are giving kids all that we need, and we have to be careful about that, the graphs, because I think that was a big piece that was important. We needed to look at it, but I think it was very shocking. But then to go back and really dig in and see, well, they are getting what the state requires. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I think we just have to be thinking about that too, is that seat time doesn't always mean hitting the standards. But our kids do need to be meeting the standards.
Correct. I think that also though, you have to look at that as I don't know how to say this, it will come out wrong probably, but that teachers do the best they can with the help from administrators and beyond, but there still is a piece of accountability in each of those rooms on a daily basis of, is good, strong work being done? Or is it the same, you know, that whole curriculum piece? And I'm talking essentials and core courses, that if you're asking your essentialists to do some of this literacy and math work, how are they doing it? What is the impact worth the time, or are they better spent using it for more social emotional types activities? You know, it turns into what are, you know, do we have people who are now qualified and up to standards for their certifications, their licensures? You know, so they're following national curriculums, they're following those kinds of things. You know, to me, we need to look at what's actually happening in each classroom. And that's up to our administrators to pass on to you, I assume.
Are you talking about, content teachers, classroom teachers?
I'm talking about every teacher.
Yeah.
Quality of the teacher.
Right,
Yes.
That's a heavy focus of our work this year is around instructional leadership and getting back into regular routines of observations and more regular or more inclusive evaluations.
So just to try to refocus us to budget and whether we feel like we'll be able to vote on a budget number tonight or need to reassess these positions and see if there's any flexibility around trying to pull down this tax rate a little bit more. It would be helpful to take the pulse of board folks, because we still have quite a lot to get through with our building leaders and board business and executive sessions. I'm just trying to be mindful, and another public comment window, so I'm just trying to be mindful of the hour. You know, so, I mean, not easy decisions at all, and I know everyone feels really passionately about kind of doing both, honoring the commitment we've made to our students and our community to offer incredible opportunities within our schools and to present budgets that our taxpayers are willing to support. And I'm also aware that even the budget as it stands with, this adjustment around the revenue piece, the fund balance, and maybe pulling out that SRO, it doesn't move it a lot, and yet I'm aware that we're still at the lower end of spending per pupil across the county and certainly relative to the rest of the state. So, just holding all those in mind, it'd be helpful to hear from people, where do we want to task Lynn and Morgan and our building leaders to look with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb and lens on these additional positions to see if we could get this tax rate down a little bit and soften the blow for our taxpayers, while trying our best to maintain a really robust staffing levels across and offerings across the schools? Or do we feel like we could make a few tweaks here tonight and move forward?
And up on the big screen now is the tweak that includes removing the SRO. So this is the full fund balance going to buy the tax rate down, cutting the SRO position, which puts you at $1.1382, or down 1.3 cents before the CLA. And I would point out to you that, we acknowledge that this CLA is a scary number. Keep in mind that many of your colleagues on other boards are looking at going forward with a tax rate that's capped at 5%. So that would be similar to you guys coming forward with a $1.21 cap tax rate before the CLA. And so they're gonna be having those conversations, in their board meetings over the next week or two. But I think even with these big increases driven by the CLA, you're gonna find that you're in the basement in terms of increases, as well as in terms of where you actually are in spending.
Okay. So Lisa, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So this is with the SRO position removed. How does the SRO cost compare to the family engagement coordinator cost?
It's a little bit more than a family engagement coordinator is what I've budgeted. Obviously, when we're dealing with new hires, I'm making some guesses in terms of how much experience they're gonna bring and what kind of health insurance plan they're gonna want.
There's 2 family engagement coordinators in there.
Okay.
Or 2, yeah.
So the SRO is comparable to a little bit more than one.
More than one.
And currently, currently the budget is asking for 2, I know we have one family engagement, or a portion of a family engagement coordinator that we're already paying for out of the local budget.
You have one that's being paid out of the ESSER grant.
Yeah, I know.
That's in the 3 NMV schools, and the second one is a new hire. And that's so that we've got coverage on all 4 schools.
But the ESSER grant is going away, so we're gonna be paying for 2 full out of our local budget, correct?
If in this budget, you would be paying for 2 full ones.
Right, so why remove an SRO when we're adding in 2 full family engagement coordinators? Why not remove one family engagement coordinator and keep the SRO?
I almost wonder though, if you're looking at impact on individual schools, the SRO is stretched around all 4, and the family engagement coordinators have direct impact on each of the schools. So if you're talking about time with kids, and our families, I see it, I don't want any of them to go away, because I think they're all good resources, but I think that for me, it would be more beneficial to have the family engagement coordinators in the schools.
Well, I too don't want any of them to go away, but clearly something has to go away, and I heard a very, very strong need for SRO position when we first talked about this. And I've been participating in a lot of statewide public safety discussions, and our public safety problems are not going away. And I know that the one SRO that we already have at Richmond High School, for instance, I don't know much about the one at Enosburg, but I do know the one at Richmond High School is pretty much stretched to the breaking point and can't respond to check-ins, was what we were told. So I'm concerned for public safety here as well.
Is that one of those conversations, Lynn, if we said, one of the other you guys would wanna go back and sit and discuss that?
I think if you give us a target, like if you decide tonight that you can't be okay, like if Morgan, you had one version where you pulled out the fund balance, right?
Yeah.
So it felt like people were pretty okay with pulling the fund balance out. It didn't seem like people were okay with pulling out money around buildings, given the PCB situation we're in. Conversations now SRO, so if you stop with the fund balance piece and then you look at what that does to your tax rate and say, can you live with that? Bring that to your voters. If you can't live with that, tell us what you can live with. Like, what's that target? How many more pennies do we need to find? And every penny is gonna result in us finding another 150 to 160 post CLA. And then let us do, I feel strongly that the principals need to weigh in terms of prioritizing what they have embedded in this budget.
However, it is up to the board to decide on what budget we wanna put forward, regardless of, all the information that we're getting from everybody, right? So we have to come to a decision whether we come to it tonight or we come to it in a special meeting that maybe not all of us are gonna be able to make. It's unfortunate that the CLA numbers didn't come out a little earlier, that they just came out last night, if we made aware of them today. So it's really hard to shift all of a sudden and say, oh, yeah, all of a sudden we've got to cut something. But I think we're going to have to cut something, or we're going to be faced with possibly not having our budget passed.
Kat?
I'm just having a hard time following, I guess, like Lynn, you were just saying we need a target number, looking at the increases, and when you actually do the math, and maybe I'm not doing this right, but if you took a property value of 300,000 and looked at the difference of 24 versus 25, it's an increase of on average around $300. So is that blowing taxes out of the water? Is that way higher than what we typically see year to year?
Morgan, I feel.
I don't know,
that's
I think it's really gonna be pretty dependent on, individual taxpayers, because you also have a significant portion of your voters that are paying based on income, and these numbers, impact them differently.
But looking at previous years, I can't think off the top of my head, and I don't know if you have it at your fingertips, but compared to last year and the year before, were we looking at, maybe around $100 increase? And again, I know it changes town to town, but just looking at kind of a general, increase in what's being perceived as this being blowing things out of the water. Because when I look at these numbers, I just don't see it.
So I don't have a dollar to dollar increase, but this is the kind of overall trend. So, it is the highest rates since we've been unified. It's, maybe not that higher than it was in FY22. But I'd have to do some digging to, figure out what that impact's gonna be on a house.
I just think it's hard to give you a target. You know, I totally think that it makes sense for Lynn to go back with the leaders and, you know, look at this further if that's what we need to do. But again, to just kind of pull out of a hat, like, what is our target? You know, what are we trying to get her to target to? It's like, how do we come up with that number?
So then you maybe need to focus on what's actually in the budget, because we don't know where everyone else is gonna land, but even with these increases of, around 10 cents or over 10 cents, it looks a lot different if the news story is that your neighbors are going up 30 to 40 cents.
That's the other thing I keep thinking about is we're trying to do the best by our children. We live in a world that is incredibly expensive. We're bottom of the barrel in terms of spending. I mean, I get trying to be strategic and look at should we maybe dump the fund balance and should we this, but I would feel okay if we could make a decision to make maybe an adjustment and maybe discuss putting this budget before the voters because it is for our children. I don't want to hack and cut and we don't need point this or point that. We need everything in this budget. And I think we can all say that with a straight face.
Thank you.
I totally agree.
So, I mean, am I hearing Emily and Kat correctly, feeling as though you'd like to cut nothing from the budget as it stands?
Do something with
I agree
the fund
with Emily.
balance.
This is
Making it
bare bones, and like when insurance premiums alone are 16% increase, and last year was also like well over to like, how are we supposed to sustain this? You know,
we can't.
yeah.
I mean, I agree, I don't feel as though there is an enormous amount of fluff in this budget. We are really thoughtful and have been all along in determining, what positions and what we need for, our students to be successful. I'm hearing from Lisa, who feels as though we do need, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, that you would like to have a reassessment of what positions and whether we might want to cut some positions.
Not really, not exactly. I think maybe I'm not articulating myself correctly. That Morgan was giving us an example of cutting an SRO. And my question was, why an SRO and not a family engagement coordinator? If we're gonna cut nothing, we need to put all of our fund balance towards buying down the tax rate. And if it is a bare bones budget, which we all agree, compared to everybody else in the state, it is a bare bones budget, then we need to present this with doing everything we can with our spare money to make it as palatable as possible to our voters. Where I would not want to present this budget and not use our fund balance to buy down the tax rate. Because then it would look like we're really doing nothing to help our taxpayers. And Morgan said there's a significant proportion of our taxpayers who do not pay the same property tax as everybody else based on income. But everyone else, I've been hearing from them, and they are not happy. So we need to have some balance here. So if we're gonna keep the budget with all the positions in it, which are worthy positions, then we need to put all our spare cash towards buying it down. That's what I'm saying here.
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying. I mean, and I completely agree. My concern is that enough? Just that fund balance, it doesn't move the needle enormously. And I'm not saying that I'm opposed to that. I think it is a good faith gesture to taxpayers, absolutely. I just worry that it may not be enough, and this budget may still feel too much for our voters to pass. I think it behooves us to try to communicate.
I think it's a distinct possibility
I mean, and I do think it behooves us to try to communicate, you know, and hopefully get people to listen to this conversation on the YouTube channel and continue to try to communicate that the board recognizes these really challenging times and the strong demands on educators and our administrators and everyone working so hard in our buildings, while we are also trying to be really mindful and respectful of our voters and our taxpayers. And trying to thread that needle is no easy task. So I hope that, if we decide to move forward with the budget as it is, it behooves us to really try to communicate to our communities and reach out to people in our communities and help them understand that we are not being, wanton with taxpayer dollars, and we are really making such a good faith effort to construct these budgets and build them in a really mindful manner that tries to meet the needs of all, which is a nearly impossible feat. So
up on the big screen is back to the budget if you plow the entire fund balance into applying down the tax rate. And so your equalized residential school tax rate would be $1.1427 before CLA, or a drop of 0.88 cents. If you combine that with a cut of about roughly one high school student, you would be at exactly a penny decrease.
So, again, I guess it would be helpful to take the temperature of the board as far as the budget as it stands, with just this piece around the fund balance. How are people feeling about that?
I think we need to go for it. I think we're low on the end, and if we're saying that our kids are important, these are things that are important for our kids. And we push our communities to say, you need to understand this is important, that our kids need this is the future of our communities, that we can't keep being the bottom of the state as far as spending. We have to up the spending if we're gonna get the results we want.
Looks like Kat's a thumbs up, and Lisa, you would like to talk?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to ask Morgan what our tax rate was last year. Do you remember? Do you have that somewhere?
I sure don't remember, but we have it somewhere. Well, it's up there right now on the big screen. So it was $1.1515.
Oh, yeah.
Before the CLAs, and then you can see each of the four towns what the actual tax rate on tax bills was.
Did everyone pass it?
Thanks.
Yeah.
And what is, Morgan, I can't see that far away, what is it now, that you said $1.1515?
So $1.1515 last year, $1.1427 under the current spending plan that you have in front of you with all the fund balance going back in.
Okay.
I can do that.
Okay. So I was gonna just take a quick pause and just pivot, because if we're going to move forward with with possibly a budget vote, I did wanna honor my welcome for kind of a small moment of additional public comment as we get toward possibly voting on this, if anyone wanted to do a quick public comment, having heard everything tonight. Okay.
I just want to confirm with Lynn maybe, what I think I heard her say, was a lot of talk about equity, literacy, and math. And that Bakersfield, and I believe it was Berkshire, that there might be a larger, longer, more needful mental health component to those. I think that's what I heard you say.
Across all of them.
Across all of them, and name those two. So if I'm looking at the equity, and that certainly music and all of its components increases literacy and math. So is there not some viability? And I also heard people here speak about kids who didn't want to go to school. I heard someone say child wasn't going to school. Heard heard them say that one of the reasons some of these children come to school, you can't teach a child if they're not in school. So doesn't that behoove us, I love that word, behoove us to do something that would embrace the children who don't want to go to school, who are now coming to school. And I think math and literacy is so intertwined with music and with having somebody to listen to, whether it's playing an instrument or being in a chorus, that it's sort of a win-win situation. The children come to school more willingly. While they're there, they might be more engaged. And if they're more engaged, then your math and your literacy will automatically increase if we're looking at statistics and numbers and all the stuff that we measure children with now that might or might not be helpful in the long run. I don't know. But I'm just throwing out that it seems like it would be a good argument to increase music. The carolers come to my house. They've been there 3 years, okay? I get a call, are you gonna be home? Yes, I am. The carolers come. They are freaking amazing. They sing in 2 parts harmony, and I'm standing there thinking, whoa, what is this? This is amazing. Sometimes I sing along, but this year I did not sing along because I don't really sing very well, and these kids got it. So I'm just throwing that out there, and I agree, all kids, I don't pick and choose children. All children need, but it sounds like we've got a good thing going, and if we could make the good thing go a little further, a little better, it just seems like a good plan. Thank you for listening.
So just to touch off that, when you talk about some schools are doing 120 minutes, some are doing 90 minutes, and then some, you're saying Bakersfield has a little more of the extracurricular. Well, it's in all 6 kids, 15 grandchildren, and they all learn very differently. They all behave very differently, and I have some that definitely 90 minutes would be max for them. And they would get a lot more out of the 90 minutes instruction and then head for gym and get so much gym time. So I think it's hard to say that you should be at 120 versus the 90. I think if 90 is the max, then that's where we could be, is at 90 and still put in those extras, because I think kids are better off with more time with their peers, because they don't always get that at home. And they learn a lot from each other and they embrace each other. And I think that's just as valuable as sitting in a classroom and watching a movie for the last 15 minutes of that 120 minutes you're getting, because that's not helpful. And the other thing is, I am disappointed that Act 46 has not done what it was supposed to do. Because I was on the school board when we got to sit in front of everybody in my town and tell them that Act 46 would bring big decreases to the budget, and all it's done is bring increases. We have not seen 1 year that we have had a decrease. So it's very, very maddening for me that the state did us wrong again. And it makes me wonder, do we want to stay with Act 46, or do we want to try to pull out and get back to where we were at one time, controlling our own school systems? And I think that was all the notes I had. Oh, one more. The 150, is that going to be a separate warrant, or no? You're not going to do it at all now?
If this passes as considered, then that won't be on the ballot at all.
It won't be on it at all.
Because automatically it goes back to
Okay.
the tax rate
Okay.
unless voters do something otherwise.
So my ending is, I think we all need to reach out to our legislature and let them know how unhappy we are with their Act 46.
I would like to say a couple of things. So I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the whole equity piece about opportunities in other schools. And Lynn said about the assistant principal in Berkshire, she said the need is significant enough to push forward. And I think the need in Bakersfield is significant enough to push forward for music, because 8 out of 10 kids in the middle school are participating in music, and a lot of those 8 out of 10 are coming to school for music. And additionally, I spent all day today with Rhoda redoing the middle school schedule for essentials. Essentials have been cut by 20 minutes. We have added a full win time. Allie is going to be doing a full win block 4 days a week, where she is doing a readers theater group. So it's a literacy group. It's public speaking. It has many, many components. They might even write their own script, but we have used her now as a literacy win person, for 30 minutes a day with a group of kids who have a literacy need. And then, I mean, again, with the equity, like Sheldon is getting, I know Sheldon is twice the size of us, but they're getting a full-time STEM teacher, which is not an opportunity that other schools, I mean, perhaps they're gonna try to hire one, but that's a need that we all have as well. And so, I don't know, it really struck me when we were questioning the assistant principal, and he said the need is significant enough to push forward, and I feel like we have shown that the need is significant enough for our students at our school to push forward this position.
I would also say, when we broke the news to them about our schedule change, the first question most of them asked was, oh my god, am I not gonna have band or chorus anymore? Like, across the board, that was their reaction. And some of them were absolutely devastated, and we told them, like, that's not what's happening, the classes are just getting shortened a little bit so we can, like, get more of this academic time, but that's what they kept going back to. We keep going to the forcing SEL down their throats, but, like, every time we have PD, it's like, oh, well, we need to be consistent, and we need to not shock them with changes, and we need to, like, do all these different things for them, and we're not actually doing those things when we make changes like this. Like, the rage that some of the kids had that day, and I get also, like, they don't wanna hear that they need more academic time, but that wasn't the part they were mad at. Like, 100%, that's not what they were angry about. It was losing out on those opportunities.
Great, thank you. I'd like to, can I say one more thing? Sure. Thank you. I know it's like so awkward that I'm like sitting here while you guys are talking here, so I just wanted to acknowledge that you're, thank you for all the kind things that everyone has said about me. Thank you, Lynn. So, I'm getting emotional.
Breathe.
I know. Breathe. I'm not seeking full-time just to be full-time. Like, I'm really not. And I really feel like the need is there. Many students have built this program so much, like, and we started in COVID. Like, I was literally going into their classrooms the first year that I was there. And, you know, I'm having 4 or 5 graduating 8th graders, but that also means that I'm having 10 or 11 4th graders coming into these elective programs. And my 6th grade I have 12, and my 5th grade I have 12. And it's like, I can't serve them in 4 days. And I'm giving up my prep that's, you know, in my schedule to serve them. And I don't have time in the day to do that. And I don't have time to give them extra things that they need, and next year I'm not gonna have time to serve the extra people. It's not there. And I would argue that the other schools that don't have full-time teachers, they should. If you want to have a music program, you want to have a robust group of people performing and working together, they should. And I think that we could really lead the way in this district and across the board. I mean, there's a ton of schools that are Bakersfield size that have full-time music teachers. I'm from Westford, and my daughter's school has a full-time music teacher there. They're basically the same size as K through 8. I know Fairfield has a full-time music teacher there. I know, and what I wanted to bring to my letter is that staff retention, it's so imperative to have full-time electives. I mean, my job, I know this because the kids talk to me about this. They're like, we had so many teachers that left after 1 or 2 years.
Yeah,
and it's because they can't, and they're like worried that they're like, that I'm gonna leave, because I'm gonna try to seek something else. Because I've done it too. I've worked in really rural communities. I've been in 3 schools for 1 year. It's really hard to build a program. So I guess if you don't want a program, then you can do whatever, but if you want a program that like really enriches people's lives, that really lets them practice their literacy and their math skills, music's one of the only things that uses both sides of the brain at the same time. If you want them to be able to come to school and have social interactions with kids that they wouldn't normally have in the musical, in the band program, in the chorus program, have one-on-one time with a teacher to be able to like really develop something that's so meaningful for them. I just want to make that clear. That's not just like, I just want full-time. It's not. And of course that would benefit me and my family, but it's really just that I don't have enough time to serve these kids. Sorry about my emotions.
I thank you all. We appreciate all your thoughts and insights. Thank you. I mean, I do feel like I want to just say that my viewpoint, I don't feel like Act 46 is really the crux of the burgeoning budgets here. We are, as we've identified, I mean, in a way, we're really able to leverage merger in a lot of very positive ways that benefit students and our communities. And we are somewhat at the mercy with things like last year's 13% health insurance increase and this year's 16% health insurance increase, and a lot of these things that are.
Did we take on that whole increase, or did you let some of your teachers
I would appreciate if you don't interrupt me.
I was just wondering if we took the whole thing on.
What do you mean, take the whole thing on?
Did we take the whole 13% increase on, or did we share that with our faculty?
We do not, state, health insurance for teachers is done through the state. It is no longer something that we at the district or SU level have any control of. We are completely at the mercy now. It's very different from back in the day. I know what your reference point is. Back in the day when we were single districts, and we used to do it all the time, looking at the health plans, and we had quite a lot more control over healthcare for our teachers and staff. That is not the case anymore. It is now mandated by the state. And as all of us who deal with health insurance in our families' lives, we see or buy on the exchange, which I do, you see every year it goes up. So we're all kind of subject to these pressures, and that is something we cannot control. And our human, our people are one of the most expensive parts of our budget, without a doubt. That health insurance piece with increases every year, well above 10% annually. This year, like we said, 16%. Not to mention salaries, because we're really trying to right size our salaries. We're trying to no longer be at the bottom of that graph in per pupil spending. And so back in the day when we used to kind of pride ourselves as single districts of being the lowest spending in the state, but what got compromised then were what we were able to offer our students and what we were able to pay our teachers. And we're trying to kind of be more competitive. We know we have a lot more to do in that capacity. We're trying to be really creative and thoughtful about our retention strategies, how we pull more teachers to want to come and work here and improve our schools and our offerings. And it all takes money. And it is not these budgets that have grown, it's not because of Act 46 in a lot of ways that has advantaged us, because we are leveraging our collaborative power now as a merged district in what we can offer. But we are very aware that the budget is much higher now than it has ever been. Some of the forces are well beyond our control, and some, like the things we're talking about here today, family engagement coordinators, SROs that are helping us keep our schools safe, the mental health needs, the pressures on us, the need to develop our own alternative systems because they are no longer out of district placements for our highest need students. We had to build that program at the SD level from the ground up. It takes an enormous amount of resources. And so I just feel, that it's important to remind people that we are still at the bottom of that per pupil spending, trying our very best to offer excellent opportunities for our students and our families and understand the burden that taxes place on a lot of families in our community. So, anyway, moving on now. It seems to me that people are feeling. Does Siri have something she would like to say? Public comment?
Does Siri know where my family is?
So, I get the sense that as a collective, we feel ready to move forward and pass this budget, knowing that we've really done our due diligence to offer up a budget that supports our students and hopefully will be supported by our taxpayers. Am I accurate in that assessment? Any further discussion on that?
I agree, and I just wanted to say too, like, I definitely want to still, and I think Lynn already said this is a priority, but just wanted to make sure that, we obviously still keep looking at all of this stuff and look at the specials, because it is really compelling to hear about this music program. I know every school, again, has kind of had its strengths, had its weaknesses, and I mean, just for an example, Montgomery's concert this year, our band, 6th through 8th, there was a handful of kids. So to hear that there's like 30 or more kids at a similar sized school, it's just, it just makes you wonder. So I really, hope that we are still committed to obviously looking at each school, each angle, each program.
So Kat, we'll continue to look at, this is the first time we've really looked at the data this way. When you tasked me, I don't even remember, maybe October,
Sheldon School.
November. It was at Sheldon in the library, and I said, sure, we can do this audit, and had no idea how much work or how complicated it was gonna be to do it. So to be able to break it down the way we have in the last couple of days, I think that there's some value in us to continue to examine that, because the intention behind this conversation is not to think about like cuts, like that's not at all what I was trying to get at with that, but we have to make sense of what we do offer. So what's the rationale? Like, there are ways that some schools are gonna need one thing because that's what the need is, and some schools are gonna need other things. So I don't disagree with the point that you were making, that's why I said that, but the board has to be cognizant of that, and when you're making a decision in Bakersfield that's starkly different between the other schools, you've got to out that and you've got to have that conversation. So we can keep doing this looking, and as we're going into next year's budget cycle, you can task us with right sizing in a different way and increasing, if that's a priority of the board.
And I think that the notion of equitable doesn't always mean equal.
Correct.
I think that's really important, because what kids might need in Bakersfield, what they're experiencing might be very different from Sheldon, and so on and so forth. So I think sometimes really looking at that is helpful.
Well, and getting creative about access. It's not always, not everybody wants it, but there should be some creative way to access it.
Yep, absolutely.
I think it's important to recognize that the starting point for all our districts has been very different.
Right.
We've all budgeted from a position of austerity from the time we were single districts, and that's played itself out in different ways. So certainly there are different focuses in different schools, but a lot of that is not a decision that we've been doing this because we value X over Y. It's because we needed to get a budget passed 6 years ago.
Morgan, can you please give me the new number once we've done that, that shift with the
fund balance.
fund balance,
So the
please?
expense number stays the same, and that's the number that you warned. So that's 22,864,306.
All right, 22,864,306, eh?
Yep.
And then are we doing the tuition rate and the secondary tuition rate or no?
We will do those as well, and the number I think you should use for that is 17,500 for each.
17,500, but they should be separate warnings, eh?
Yes. Yep.
And then,
And then in terms of the annual meeting warning, I sent a draft out this morning. The one change is that I will take out the article asking for any of the fund balance to move into the capital reserve fund. And again, at some point, we need to set a time and place for an informational meeting sometime after February 24th.
okay, we can do that at the end under board business?
Yep.
Okay, so are we ready? All right. I will make a motion to warn the FY 25 Northern Mountain Valley Unified Union School District budget in the amount of $22,864,306. We will do that by roll. Lisa?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
Miranda? John?
Aye.
Erin? Emily? And Mary is an aye. I will make a motion to announce the FY 25 elementary tuition rate of $17,500. Lisa?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
Miranda? John?
Aye.
Erin? Emily? And Mary is an aye. We'll make a motion to announce the FY 25 secondary tuition rate of $17,500. Lisa?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
Miranda? John?
Aye.
Erin? Emily? And Mary is an aye. And then finally, a motion to approve and sign the Northern Mountain Valley Unified Union School District 2024 annual meeting warning. Lisa?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Arlene? Miranda? John?
Aye.
Erin? Emily? And Mary is an aye. Thank you, everyone. I know it's a really heavy lift. Nicely done. It's good. It's good stuff.
That's all I have.
Fingers crossed. All right.
Let's do 2025 special.
Oh, yeah. Well, I haven't even done the principal reports yet.
We're not done. You're not going anywhere.
The board meeting.
I was wondering what she was doing, but I didn't want to.
I'm sorry, it's okay.
Okay, so it looks like we have some people transitioning out now.
That's what I'm supposed to do.
It's up to you.
I mean, we're not done with our meeting, but if you were ready to leave, I just asked you to kind of go. We have quite a bit still to tackle, but you all are leaving.
I think so.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I think so. Thank you.
So that you know, so you know.
No problem, thank you. All right, so let's, we'll try to stay on task. And what I would love to do as we move through principal reports, just because it is so